a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Welcome to the CoCo Crew Podcast. A delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information. Featuring the Tandy Color Computer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
CoCo.
All right. Welcome, CoCo Cruisers, to the CoCo Crew Podcast, episode 38. Very exciting. Woohoo! We are joined by all our regular hosts. Of course, this is John Linville. Mr. Neil Blanchard, you there? Hello?
Here. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Neil. Hello, Mike Rowan. How you doing, Myro?
I am doing good.
Very good, very good. And, of course, our world traveler, Mr. Boise Pete. How you doing, Boise?
Hey, doing well.
Coming to you from the People's Republic of California. All right, very exciting. Having a good day, having a good month. And so we're, 4 months away from Tandy Assembly? Not even there at this point, I guess.
Yeah, frightening.
Tandy Assembly is making good progress, it sounds like, on the planning. There's some exciting news. CoCo Fest also moving along. It's now about 10 months away. That'll be, next May. Exciting news to Glenside there. I don't think we have it in their news section, but they are accepting nominations for officers for the standard president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. Then they kind of restricted it and said, well, it really ought to be somebody local. Well, they only have like 4 people local. Anyway, so I'm not sure what they're going to get out of that, but I don't know. Hopefully you get somebody exciting and interesting who wants to work on CoCo Fest. Well, it's something to look forward to, but what's been going on recently? What, are you guys keeping busy? You doing any projects lately?
Yeah. Well, I made up a few more joypad adapters. That was cool. I haven't done those in a while.
Yeah, very cool. The joypad adapters with the support for the extra buttons, I'll note, and the nice classical plastic box to plug stuff into, which I think is a bonus. Some people may not agree, but very cool. Otherwise, keeping busy?
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
Keep busy over here.
How about you, Mike? You were pretty shoulder to the grindstone there for a while. Are things easing up any?
Sadly, no.
I'm sorry.
The summer has eaten me alive between repair projects around the house. I've thought about projects a lot, but...
That's the way it goes, right?
Yeah. I'm hoping things will loosen up here in the next month, though.
How about you, Boise? You got anything running CoCo-wise lately?
No, unfortunately, I don't. I went to the West and my batteries were charged up, and then all of a sudden they just drained real fast. Like putting 2 9-volt batteries together, they just fizzled out. So,
yeah.
like Mike and Neil, real world is kicking me in the behind.
Yeah, well, that definitely happens. Me lately, lightning struck, and I've been talking for a while about, I'd kind of like to do some kind of compiler work or something, or maybe for the MC10, but I'm not sure, blah, blah, blah. Well, then Brett Gordon posted a link, I think over on Discord. He posted a link, a project he found on GitHub that was just this really simple, bare bones, simplest version of BASIC you've ever seen, but a compiler for BASIC that compiled to x86, 8086 assembly targeting DOS. It's like the whole thing was like 1,000 lines of code, and but it's pretty clearly written. Maybe not exactly my style, but clear enough to understand. Just kind of grabbed hold of it and said, I wonder what I can do with this, and started converting some of the assembly code output to match actually the MC10. Pretty simple, and before long I had the basic compiler up and able to compile the example program and run that, and said, this thing's pretty simple, and the language could use some extension this way and that way and the other, and all these little, it's like they're perfectly bite-sized kind of projects to extend the language here and there. And I've been working on that for a week or two now, and I've got a pretty nice little basic compiler that runs on the MC10. Pretty happy with it. I mean, I've got a list about probably 24 items or long on changes or improvements I want to make. Pretty excited about it, and the assembly code actually should be fairly simple to change over to target the 6809 as well. So either the CoCo or the Dragon. But things are looking up for having a new basic compiler for all the color computers here before too long. Anyway, maybe before CoCo Fest. How's that?
That's exciting news.
Good stuff.
I'm pretty excited about it.
That's great.
So you finally found kind of the perfect project for the perfect moment, which is kind of the way it happens, right? You kind of got to get in there and be ready, but then something happens and then it finally hits you. Oh, I'm actually ready to do this. So that's pretty exciting. How about eBay or any other kind of acquisitions? Anybody got anything new?
I do.
What'd you get?
I'm very excited. I finally got a Tandy Sensation PC.
Yeah. Very exciting. What is it about the Sensation that turns you on?
The last one Tandy made before going to Funk.
Just sort of the historical marker of it or whatever.
And it has enough power when souped up to do a CoCo emulator. So I can technically beat CoCo on
it. There you go.
That's pretty cool. Mike, how about you? You got anything lately?
Not a thing. Nope. It's been too busy.
Too busy. Boise, I'm assuming you haven't been picking up much stuff either?
Nope, you know the answer to that.
Yeah. Well, they kind of go together, I guess, to some degree.
Yeah.
Projects.
Summer's killing us, man. Summer's killing us.
Yeah.
I did pick up something neat on eBay. I had to look twice at it when I saw it. Still not 100% sure. I think it's really something for the Model 1 TRS-80. But it's a little block. It's just a little metal box. Looks like an old Radio Shack project kit or whatever, old electronics thing. But I mean, it's a manufactured item. It's stenciled front, whatever. But it's called the Data Enhancer DE80, and this is microset on the top. And so basically, it's a little box, and it's got little 1/8" jacks, kind of one on the front and one on the back, I think is the way it is. But basically, it's like an audio filter that you plug in between your computer and your cassette, and it's supposed to help to clean up the signal so that you can have an easier time loading data cassettes. Which we all complain a little bit about loading stuff off a cassette on the CoCo, but I think the CoCo is actually pretty good for that compared to some of the other systems. I hear a lot of people talk about on the TRS-80s and even the Apples and some of the others that loading stuff off a cassette was a major pain. So I guess that's what this sort of box is for. I don't know. It was only about $15. I said, well, what the hell? Pry it open, see what's inside.
That's cool. You said it was like microset?
Data set, I think is what it said on it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I don't know. Anyway, cool stuff. That's my eBay acquisition. All right. Well, I think that's probably enough to get us started. So why don't we take a little short break and come back with some announcements.
Tandy keeps red, red like the brake key. Tandy keeps green, green like the TV. Tandy makes all of your dreams come true. Tandy's got the magic of CoCo too.
TRS-80 color computers are better than ever. We improved our most popular family computers with a compact white case, low-profile electric typewriter quality keyboard, and reduced the system price. Come see the new TRS-80 color computer too.
Tandy makes a product that's brand new. Tandy's got the magic. Tandy's got the magic. Tandy's got the magic of CoCo too.
All right, CoCo Cruisers. Now we are back with some announcements. You are, of course, listening to the CoCo Crew podcast, and we are available on Twitter as at CoCoCrewPodcast or at CoCo Crew Podcast. We also have a Facebook page available that is on Facebook as the CoCo Crew Podcast. If you search for it, I'm sure you can find it. We are available through iTunes and Google Play for normal podcast downloads. Of course, through our own RSS feed available at CoCoCrew.org. We're also available for streaming through Stitcher and TuneIn. And TuneIn, of course, is the service that Alexa likes to use for if you have an Echo. I joked for a while about saying, Alexa, play the CoCo Crew podcast. Well, my wife suddenly decided she needed one, so I was able to verify that actually does work now. So, very fun. All right, well, so we are a member of the Throwback Network. This is a collection of similarly themed podcasts with all with a retro theme, some with technology bent, some not so technology oriented, but still with a nod towards the 80s. If you are looking for another outlet for your podcast listening time, then we suggest you check out the Throwback Network. Also, we are a member of the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. This is also a collection of similar podcasts. In this case, each one's centered on a game or game console or home computer. And so, again, if you're looking for other ways to spend your podcast listening time, once you've finished listening to the CoCo Crew podcast, then do check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Audio for the CoCo Crew podcast is hosted on CyberEars. If you have a need to host audio or similar content online, maybe you've got your own podcast, then we recommend that you check out CyberEars, where you will get your audio on your terms. If you'd like to reach out and touch someone figuratively on the CoCo Crew podcast, then we have some email addresses set up to reach all of the hosts. You can use show, it's HOW, at CoCoCrew.org, CoCoCrew.org. You can also use podcast at CoCoCrew.org or feedback at CoCoCrew.org. And if you would like to concentrate on just one of the hosts, then you can send email to John, JOHN, at CoCoCrew.org, Neil, NEIL, at CoCoCrew.org, Mike, MIKE, at CoCoCrew.org, or Boise, BOISY, at CoCoCrew.org. Those are our standard announcements. Now we'd like to talk a little bit about upcoming events that we think you might be interested in. Coming up August 4th and 5th of 2018, that'll be VCF, Vintage Computing Festival West. That is going to be held at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. Maybe we can send Boise out to scout out the place. Be in a couple of weeks. Following that, on August 25th, 2018, I've got a new one. Looks like kind of a small one. The listener sent this in. Atari Computer Enthusiasts of Columbus will be holding the annual Vintage Computer and Video Game Swap Meet on Saturday, August 25th, 2018. Shoppers are free, and there's a $10 charge per table for dealers. So if you are in the Columbus, Ohio general area, you may want to go and look and see if you can get your vintage computing buying needs taken care of. Coming up in September 15th to 16th, 2018, VCF Midwest, our Vintage Computing Festival Midwest. That will be held in its usual location, Elk Grove Village, Illinois, definitely in the Chicago area.
VCF Midwest is always a good time. I'm planning to go this year.
Very exciting. Heading on to October 19th to 20th, 2018. The Portland Retro Gaming Expo, PRGE. This is seems to be a pretty well-known and well-attended event. Never been myself. Looks kind of cool. Definitely a gaming-oriented convention. Might be some old computer stuff too. You know, console gaming, maybe old arcade games, that sort of thing. If that sounds fun to you and you're in the Pacific Northwest, then I recommend you get to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo in October 19th and 20th. Okay, back to the Chicago area. November 10th, 2018, the Chicago TI International World's Fair. If you are a TI 99 person, this might be your big event. Otherwise, if you are stuck in the Chicago area at that time, you may want to go check it out anyway. Never been, don't know anything about it. I've heard it's okay. Could be fun, except
There's better places to be.
There's a better place to be on November 10th. November 10th and 11th. Same day, same weekend, 2-day event, Tandy Assembly 2018, and that will be in Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah, we're thrilled. It's going to be fun.
So Tandy Assembly should be a cool event this year. It was going to be cool anyway, but hopefully even cooler. All right, moving on. So I'm announcing World of Commodore 2018, December 2018 is usually the first week of December. Last year it was the second week, so weekend, I should say. I haven't seen an announcement yet, kind of a placeholder here, but if you are interested in going to World of Commodore in Toronto, Canada, then just be aware it should be coming up in December. Maybe you can go and say hello to Neil when you get there.
I will be here.
And of course, last on the list and first in our hearts, there, we do have a place on the list here for CoCo Fest 2019, which is going to be on May 4th to 5th of 2019. So again, CoCo Fest, the big CoCo gathering, previously unrivaled for TRS-80 and CoCo people. We may have stirred that up a bit with the Tandy Assembly the past couple of years, but still definitely have fond thoughts about CoCo Fest, and definitely all plan to be there.
Absolutely, love it.
Very exciting, something to plan for. Well, those are our announcements for this month. We're going to take another break, and we'll be back with some news.
Telewriter 64, the color computer word processor. 3 display formats, 51, 64, or 85 columns by 24 lines. True lowercase characters. User-friendly full-screen editor. Right justification. Easy hyphenation. Drives any printer. Embedded format and control codes. Runs in 16K, 32K, or 64K. With or without extended color basic. Menu-driven disk and cassette I/O. No hardware modifications necessary. So simple to use, it makes writing fun. Telewriter 64 can display more text on the screen than the Apple II, Atari, TI, VIC, or even the TRS-80 Model 3. Telewriter 64 surpasses all others for user-friendliness and pure power. Step up to professional word processing on the low-cost TRS-80 color computer. Telewriter 64, just $49.95 for cassette or $59.95 for disc. Telewriter 64 from Cognitech.
All right, now we're back with some news. Our first news item is, well, it's really a video, and it's not even particularly a new video, but one that I like. Well, it does say published in April 2018, so maybe it is fairly new. Anyway, we had a video from this guy on the last episode, this Kevin Henney. He does talks about computer science topics or whatever, and this one he's talking about, says procedural programming is back. It never went away. It's sort of a thing that, no matter how many new or fashionable practices in the world of computer science and programming, however many they show up or whatever, quite often they're really just echoing something that's from the past, which I figure is a cool concept or idea for the kind of people that might listen to a retro computing podcast. So I enjoyed the video. I think you might too. Seems like a pretty good speaker, this Kevin Henney, so go and check him out. And,
yeah, he's entertaining.
Moving on, post from Phil Harvey Smith, and he's got some pictures from, they recently had the Dragon meetup there in Cambridge, certainly in the UK. He's posting some pictures of that. So if you like to look at pictures of people having fun with old computers, then go and check it out. All right. The next item comes from the CoCo mailing list. This is from Brendan Donahue. Brendan is announcing that he's got CoCo VGA release 0.9 available. He's got a link for downloads at CoCoVGA.com. This is a bug fix in which a VG6 or 64 column mode display may flicker when changing palette colors on the fly. So as a bug fix, says users who have a USB blaster JTAG can program it themselves. Otherwise, catch him at an upcoming event. So very cool. Nice to see Brendan continuing to support his things. A lot of times people make things and kind of throw them over the wall into the community. This is not such a project. So Brendan is doing a good job keeping up with that. very good.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I mean, he'll update them for you at the show if you don't have a Byte Blaster or if you're not comfortable doing it. Good to see.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to have such good support for a product. Thanks, Brendan.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right, the next one we have is from Carlos Camacho. He's quite known in the CoCo community, I guess now. He's on the list on Facebook. What he's doing right now is he dived into replacing the feet of a CoCo's case. I think we've all been there at one point.
Yeah, kind of cool. So it's reassuring to have a video of it, just in case you're doing it and uncertain about the next step.
Are you insinuating cold feet?
Or a foot fetish.
Yeah. Probably better to assemble with the feet already worn.
Yeah, this next one here, I was kind of sad about this one from the TRS-80 Color Computer Archive. As of 2018, June the 14th, all of William Barden's books have been removed by his request.
I didn't get a story here. I don't know if anybody else really got a story. It's hard to know what's happened here. I mean, obviously related to copyright. If you don't protect your copyright, there's certain claims that can be moved against you. I wouldn't think protecting the copyright on the books in question would matter much, but some people say that not asserting full copyright on previous works will endanger your stuff on the newer works. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I don't know. I'd like to assume this is not Barden getting mad at the community and taking his ball and going home. Hard for it not to feel that way a little bit, but I'm going to assume that's not the case. If anybody is in touch with Mr. Barden, I've reached out to him on Facebook, but have had no success in getting a response from him. If you are in touch with Mr. Barden, please tell him we'd like to talk to him, or please feel free to get the story and give us some feedback. We'll even put you on the air. All right.
Well, on the upside, most of his books are pretty readily available.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're not too hard to find for the most part in the used book market. And probably still not too hard to find, unlike archive.org or whatever. I don't know if he's made it out there yet or not.
Yeah.
But,
All right, we got another one, another game from Jim Gary for the
Woohoo.
MC10. Wouldn't be a podcast without Jim Gary.
No, it wouldn't.
and,
This game's called Clear a Path. It looks kind of neat. Checking the video out of it here. What
Yeah,
do
it
you
is
think,
cool.
John? Did you see it?
it's ported from the NEC PC 6001, which I guess is also known as the NEC Trek. Same video hardware, more or less at least, as the MC10. Pretty cool.
He's been doing a few games from that platform now.
Yeah,
Notice.
very cool.
Our next news item is from Genevieve at YouTube. Why We Create, a look at the people who develop new gamers for retro video game consoles. This is a pretty interesting video, and it's just as it sounds. It's pretty lengthy, but it's interviews with people that talk about making video games for these old computers and gaming consoles and why they do it and what's involved, and definitely worth watching.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. There's a little bit of navel gazing on by some people like us on why they do the crazy things we all do. But
Yeah, you'll certainly be able to relate if you're a CoCoer.
yeah, I think so. But anyway, so cool video. Spent a little time with that.
Our next one is from Peter Gubaj, and it's about the Dragon Drive. You probably know a little bit more about this, John. I looked at it. I mean, it looks like it's a drive emulator that's been integrated with, basically merged a GoTech with a controller, a floppy controller for the Dragon. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, he had them available to order. I think I ordered one. I spent money on something. I think it was this. But it looks kind of cool. I mean, so it's the same general ideas of CoCo SDC, kind of different hardware implementation. I'm not sure if it'll have the nice OS additions like SDC DOS or whatever, but maybe it could grow them later. So I think it's good to see some other hardware options to fulfill that need. Eventually, they're not going to be able to get parts for the CoCo SDC, and they're going to have to redesign it. It'd be nice if something else is already in the pipeline.
And it's good to see something in the Dragon community.
Yeah, Dragon community definitely too. It's nice to see some extra activity there.
Did you pick one up, John?
I ordered one. I haven't got it yet. But,
Yeah, same here. I think it's kind of a built to order, right?
Yeah, I think it'll probably be a while, but if you don't order, you don't get it.
Our next item is Arcade Game Designer, AGD, for the CoCo. This is from OSS003 at Atari Age.
So this is kind of a cool project. Help people build games without having to do much programming. I think there's a little scripting image built into the game system, so you have to a scripting language, I should say. So you have to do a little bit of scripting, but mostly a matter of producing the art and placing it in the minimal scripting to tie it together. But you see it can actually target a variety of systems. They've got some examples there in the thread where they've targeted the ZX Spectrum and the Acorn Atom. The Atom has the 6847 video chip that's common to the CoCo and Dragon, the MC10. Theoretically, with a little bit of work to support this game system, then we could reap the benefit of a library of pre-existing games that were really designed for other systems that would either immediately run on the CoCo or would be already 90% there or something like that. So definitely an attractive option. If anybody is interested in doing that kind of work, I would definitely encourage you to pick it up. Very exciting stuff.
Fred.
Yeah.
Remember when I wanted to run the business on our color computer?
Yeah.
And you said it was too hard to move back and forth through all those different programs.
Yeah.
And you said all the software would cost $1,000.
Yeah.
Well, you want to hear something?
No.
VIP Library integrates all the applications we need, and guess who sells it?
Tiny Tim.
No, SD Enterprises.
Swell.
All 6 VIP applications are combined onto one disk. VIP Database, VIP Writer, VIP Spell, VIP Calc, Terminal, and Disk Zap. So we can do mail merge, finances, correspondence, all with VIP Library.
Yeah?
Yeah, and it's not $1,000. It's just $169.95.
Wonderful.
Finally, we'll have time to go see a movie.
No. VIP Library, the only integrated application suite your CoCo will ever need.
911, what is the address to your emergency?
I'm not taking it anymore. I've had enough!
Meet Ryan. He's been up all night debugging a program on his color computer. If only he had subscribed to the Rainbow. The Rainbow features more information and more in-depth treatment of the TRS-80 color computer, TDP System 100, and Dragon 32 computer than anyone else. If only Ryan had joined the thousands of people who say that the Rainbow is an absolute necessity for their color computers. Don't become a statistic. 12 issues of the Rainbow is just $22. Don't become another Ryan. The Rainbow, the color computer monthly magazine.
All right, so moving on. See, we've got a Hackaday link. Well, it is a Hackaday, but it's from Andrei Skvortsov. Sure, I just butchered that. I don't know if that's Russian or Ukrainian or whatever, but definitely not plain old redneck. So sorry, Andre. Feel free to write in or let us know how I mispronounced it. Anyway, he has what is called a basic. That's basic, like beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code, basic microcomputer based on Arduino. And so this is another one of those projects you see from time to time where rather than trying to re-implement a specific machine from the past, they sort of re-implemented kind of the feel of the past using a little bit more modern hardware, in this case the Arduino hardware. So really they've got two Arduinos. One's doing the main CPU stuff and one's handling like the keyboard and whatever. They've got an SD card reader in there somewhere too. Point being, if you're into old computers from the 80s, part of your interest might be based around programming in BASIC. And so, if so, this one is the kind of thing that might turn you on. You may want to look at this project, see if you can recreate it or otherwise acquire it and see what you can do with it. It looks like fun. Thank you, Andre. All right. Oh, here's one. The next one. This is really for the geeks in the audience, I should say. This is from Jim McClanahan. He's a ham radio operator at W4JBM, and he has published an article on what he calls the Kolakowski sequence in BASIC. The Kolakowski sequence is an infinite sequence of symbols in the set 1 and 2 that is its own run length encoded value. And what that means is the first one is the run, so the next one is the value of, and so 1 and 2, so you run of 1 and the value is 2, but then the 2 becomes the length of the next run. So you got 1 and 2, that's the length of the next run is 2 and 1, so the 1 is the length of the following run, which is 1 and 2. And anyway, this is a long sequence of just 1, 2. I don't know how you get excited about that. But I definitely have known people that get excited about these sequences of numbers and whatever. And so he's got a basic program that he's provided that talks about how to do it. It looks like it's written for maybe Commodore Basic, or could be AppleSoft. I don't know. It's not Color Basic. I can tell because it's got the percent marks indicating integer variables. With a little work, you could probably drop all this at percent marks, and then it'll probably work okay, just slower with a Color Basic. If you're into playing with BASIC and doing weird mathematical sequences, this is your perfect project. So, the Kolakowski sequence in BASIC. Have fun. Thank you, Jim. Kieran Anscombe, who's the author of XRoar, a sometimes CoCo and Dragon community hero or celebrity or whatever. He did a port of a game from, I think it's from the BBC Micro, called Dungeons, Dunjunz. For the recent Dragon Gathering, he made up some tapes. And so the game will run on either Dragon 32 or Dragon 64, I guess the Tana Dragon as well, or the Tandy Color computer, as long as it's got 32K. He's got some tapes left over, and he's offering them for sale. Now's your chance. If you need a brand new cassette game for your color computer, and you've had all the cartridge games you could stand, and you're gonna have to put it by a cassette game, this is the one to buy. What do you think, Neil? Did you run it out to get you a cassette from Kieran?
I am going to. That's excellent news.
Yeah, I just exchanged email with him today.
Yeah, he even picked the American spelling for Dungeons.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Is it allowed in Canada then?
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty close. Oh, Lord.
All right. Our next news item is from BBC.com. BBC releases Computer History Archive for your viewing pleasure. This looks pretty cool. I checked it out briefly, and it looks like they released quite a few. It's a lot of information here.
267 programs.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. If you're a BBC Micro person, apparently there's 166 BBC Micro programs included in those TV programs. So that's pretty neat. So,
yeah.
Anyway, kind of like the UK version of the Computer Chronicles, but maybe eventually we can get to this Ian McNaught Davis to come to something.
Yeah, it's still cool to see. That's great. Our next news item is from Diego Brizio.
I think it's Brizio. Yeah.
All right. And he's basically working on his website, which is actually a really cool site. I've been on it a few times. He's updating and adding items to CoCoWares.com. He wants to remind everyone that the site is out there, and I think he is taking, if you have a site you want added, he'll put it on there for you. The next one's from Travis Pope, and it's VEF2 PNG program is released. So it's an OS9 image to PNG converter.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. This VEF is one of those, came back to the color computer community after being away for a while. Like, what is a VEF? And so I guess it's some sort of picture format that was used by some of the, the color computer picture viewers or whatever. But so it's somewhat unique to the color computer, but it's kind of cool to get some tools that at least document the format.
Right.
And get a chance to maybe we can view some of those pictures in the future.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, as PNG is common, so that's handy.
Yeah, well, at least for now. So
right.
I know MV Canvas used VEF for its files.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I think,
right. You did.
I think VEF is one I've got some notes that document it somewhere. But there were two or three others that just come from that early 90s time frame, I guess, or maybe late 80s, early 90s time frame that they weren't really outside formats, but they weren't documented too well on the insides either, so they're almost lost. And so try to make sure we don't lose any formats, not just for pictures, but if you've got stuff that's if you have notes on any of the formats that were used for like compressing files or like picture formats or any kind of disk image formats or anything like that, definitely try to dig those out and preserve documentation on those, if not actually using it to produce some code to access stuff. Documentation is probably more important, because even if you do write some code that works today, it's amazing how much code you can know was working 5 years or 10 years ago, and you go to compile it, and today it won't even compile. It's like, what changed?
Yeah.
Nothing changed, but you can't even compile it with a modern compiler or whatever. If you've got a stockpile of VEF images, now's your chance to get them flipped over to PNGs and uploaded to Instagram or whatever.
Be interesting to see the percentage of them that are adult themed.
Yeah, that would be funny.
Yeah.
That would be funny.
Okay, our next story is a Commodore guy's impression of the CoCo. This is from RPI Guy 9907 at Atari Age. This is an Atari Age forum. It's kind of an interesting thread, and it's from a Commodore person, kind of his view of the CoCo 3 and what he thought was good about it and what he thought was bad about it.
Yeah.
Interesting reading.
So I included it here both from the outsider's perspective, to give us an idea of what other people think, and then also to kind of promote that there is some activity over on Atari Age, which is a great site for a lot of vintage computing and gaming things. So if forum sites like Atari Age turn you on, then maybe it's a good place to go and represent for the CoCo.
Seems to be.
Yep.
Not just about Ataris.
No, it's a little poorly named. There's a lot of other stuff. The biggest thing that Atari Age is a promoter of cartridges for all these old platforms.
Yeah.
I should contact, I think the guy's name is Al. Seriously, if he wants to sell our cartridges.
Yeah.
Maybe I should replace Facebook with Atari Age. That might be good for me.
It might be good for your attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, not your attitude specifically, but just in general.
Yeah, anyone's attitude, right.
Yeah.
A breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Oh. Our next story is from Lewin Day at Hackaday, and it's a light gun for LCDs, thanks to maths.
I love that maths, the UK English, instead of saying mathematics or just math, they say maths.
Yes.
I'm not sure why it's plural. Anyway, yeah, it's kind of neat that I saw this somewhere else before I saw this listing, and wasn't sure if the guy was serious, or I think he had like one of the fundraising sites, like a Kickstarter or GoFundMe or something, and I wasn't quite sure if it was serious or not. I'm still not 100% sure, but he's still flogging it, so maybe he's serious. I mean, it sounds reasonable. Use digital photography and computer or machine vision to kind of square up the video image and output, a location where you're actually focusing pistol or whatever. But it's plausible. You could make it work. Maybe we'll be able to play Iron Forest on your LCDs at some point.
That would be awesome.
But yeah, I've had some ideas on how to do this myself that I think are plausible, but I just haven't been dedicated enough to work through how to do it.
You were talking about this a few years ago to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you could use a Wiimote and like a Raspberry Pi or something to do some of the processing for you, and then create like a a pseudo signal for the video or whatever. I don't know. I think he could do it, but not unlike what he's doing, but not exactly the same. Hopefully he'll figure it out, and maybe we can just use his.
Our next item is from Carrie Sharfglass at Hackaday. ESP8266 home computer hides unexpected gems.
So this is another one of those. If you like programming in BASIC, you might be interested in something like this. So in this case, it's got that ESP8266, which is, essentially it's a wireless Wi-Fi kind of chip that has a CPU in it that people are using for a variety of things in the hacker world. And in this case, they're running BASIC on it. And so it's like we had an earlier project, and we mentioned that was you running BASIC on Arduino. And if you want to run it on the ESP8266, here's another option for doing it. Could be cool.
Yeah, it even has composite video.
Yep.
Yeah, that's handy.
Okay, so we have another one from Diego Brizo. In Furious Felines 2, mice are so hungry that they will dig through the walls to get to the cheese. Coming soon to a CoCo 3 near you. So this is sort of a stealth announcement of a new video game for the CoCo 3. So he had this game called Furious Felines, which was sort of inspired by Angry Birds. And I guess now he's got a follow-on game. Looks like similar graphics. With the mice shooting through the bottom of the walls or something. I don't know how. Looks like the walls would collapse once they went through, but maybe not.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the gameplay is, because and for our listeners, if you haven't checked out Furious Felines, it's definitely worth it. It's a cool game.
It is.
So very cool. Thanks, Diego. We look forward to seeing the full version.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Hey, it looks good. I saw his post there on Facebook. Screenshots look great.
Yeah, it does look good. All right, next one we got a blog entry from Jeff Wozniak. I don't know if it's related to the Woz from the Apple world or not, but massacring seed pointers. And he says, I'm taking a break from debugging bugs to talk about a calamitous bleep show of textbook writing, mastering seed pointers, tools for programming power. So basically, he trashes this old textbook written to teach people how to program using pointers in C, the C language. First, I wasn't sure if it was worth listing. He kind of throws up some C code, kind of like this is obviously terrible, and you kind of have to look at it a couple of times to figure out, well, that's, I see that, you just throw up a piece of code, and not everybody's going to see it immediately, what's wrong with it, and not everybody's going to agree that it's the most horrific thing ever. I won't disagree that what he shows is terrible, but anyway, it kind of goes through, the reason I included it is not just to let him tear up, to publicize him tearing up this poor old author's work, but it's to kind of emphasize that just because he picked up an old book on programming, which often are good reads and often can be very educational, might also be trash. Just like you might pick up a book today and the information in is hardly worth the paper it's written on, you might pick up an old book that's exactly like that too. So, always take everything with a grain of salt, I guess is the point there. But interesting, some of us, I think, are prone to saying, well, this is an old book on programming. They really knew what they were doing back then.
Ancient wisdom, yeah.
And it's like, well, be careful. It's not all good.
For years, air fresheners have been used to hide unpleasant odors. But until now, your choices have always been wildflowers, potpourri, country spices, citrus, and other floral derivatives. That's all about to change with new Retro Fresh from Jackson & Jackson. Retro Fresh is a walk down memory lane. Each fragrant mist smells like your favorite retro computers. Salmon patties for dinner? Now it's the scent of printer ribbons, Apple IIs, and TRS-80s. Too many cats in the house?
Now it's just the scent of heating power supplies, newly opened diskettes, and warm CRTs. Uncle Bob, use your bathroom after the chili cook-off? Replace that offensive odor with the aroma of new computers. New RetroFresh comes in 3 cents. Apple II and TRS-80s. Warm power supply and CRTs. And new computer. It's like a VCF in a can. New RetroFresh. Free yourself from the floral prison of other air fresheners.
Jackson & Jackson is an air freshener company.
New from Carriage Return New Line Cinema.
Good morning, Major. Sir, why was I brought here? What you're about to hear is classified top secret presidential.
What is this place?
This is where you'll train. Major, the war isn't going well for Earth.
This is the aliens' newest attack ship, the TRG-5. We need you to infiltrate the alien base, steal the core components, and then return them for analysis.
Pay attention, Major. Your suit will absorb radiation, but only a limited amount. There are 3 decontamination chambers in the facility. It's critical that you reach each one if you want to live.
We only have 4 weeks to prep for this.
What do you need from me?
Your best, Major.
Major, do you hear that sound? That sound means you're dead. Too much radiation. Reset your suit and try again.
Why did you pick me?
Because I think you're the best man for the job. Because we've only got 1 shot at this.
What if I fail?
Then we all die.
Power up your suit, Major. This is your electro gun. Aim it and fire. Holy shit, Major! Remember, each time you fire your weapon or use your cloak, you're exposing your suit to even more radiation.
Major, it's time.
I've reached the access point. Wish me luck. I'm going in.
Shock Trooper, rated CoCo 13.
All right, so let's see. Moving on. Got a Facebook post from Richard Kelly. It says he's uploaded a file here. I guess this is a disk image. The Ladderman 2 extended color basic version. The file seems to have disappeared. Simple platforming game with 25 levels. Graphics inspired by releases from Tom Mix. Sounds like maybe not the greatest game. It says it's slow, but versus
written totally in basic.
Well, it must be, but here it is for those who want to see the game before it's ported to a compiled C Basic 3 form. So I didn't pull down the image, but it sounds like maybe it is written in Basic. I don't know. Anybody check out Ladderman?
Yeah, I think it is in Basic actually.
The graphics look kind of nice.
Yeah, it does.
Looks nice.
So I don't know. Hopefully that's fun. I wonder how the C Basic 3 compile came out. Oh, well, so I guess we'll just have to see. But Richard, would love to hear from you if you did get it compiled, what you had to do and what were your results. Love to hear from you, or write up a blog or something. Let us know.
So Apple II for Sir Joy, gaming through the serial port. I haven't looked at this yet. This has, I guess, is this a new hardware product?
Yeah, so it's an Apple II product. I think it's really for the Apple IIc, which is a compact one. It says the device allows you to connect 4 digital joysticks to an Apple II computer using a serial port. So that's why I included it. It's kind of interesting. Well, there's so many people claiming to be interested in interfacing to the serial ports in the CoCo world these days. Here's something you might could use. But it's not a terrible idea. I think they would hang a microcontroller off of a serial port and then hang 4 joystick ports off of the microcontroller. And so it kind of gives you a way to expand your number of inputs through your one serial port. Again, not a terrible idea as long as you can keep the latency down to something that's appropriate for whatever games you're playing.
So this next news item is something that is very cool. Brett Gordon, I presume, Beretta, has a great start to a Plato client for the CoCo 3. For those of you who don't know what Plato is, it is an I guess late 70s, early 80s kind of vintage terminal service, right? Even before that, right?
Well, it's even through the 80s, I think. It's almost like the Prodigy, which had a client that could actually do graphics and stuff. So I guess the Play-Doh client could actually do graphics, like real graphics, not like just ANSI graphics.
Correct. And so I've been advocating for something like that for a while for the CoCo. I was looking at maybe doing something CoCo specific, but this is cross-platform, and it looks like he's got some screenshots and it's working. I don't know if it's OS 9 or Physics, but this is a great start.
Yeah, I think it is actually supposed to be on Disk Extended Color Basic.
Oh wow, even better.
It's a little unusual for Beretta, but
yeah, I don't know if it's written in BASIC or written in assembly, but
yeah,
great.
I think it's assembly code, but it is written to run under Disk Basic or whatever to maximize the audience or whatever. It is cool. You can combine some of the interest that people have had with using these serial port to internet adapters or whatever, so you can get your CoCo on the net and have a place to actually get content for it. And the content might actually be a little more modern-ish or whatever than just hooking up to an old BBS. And much as we all are fond of old BBSs,
Nothing wrong with BBS.
They are a bit like visiting an old folks' home or something. Oh, goodness.
Just to put a shameful plug out there, my BBS, Internal Affairs, is definitely not an old folks' home.
Well, Neil, what can I say?
The hottest singles BBS in Toronto.
I want to rename it to Senior Village or something like
that. Tandy'sOnly.com.
Oh, good times. Well, cool. So yeah. Anyway, this is a good thing, and I'm all behind it. Having a Play-Doh client, especially if you can do things like get modern news and things that are relevant, be kind of cool. All right. So my VCC project update by Walter Zambati. This looks like a CoCo list post where Walter has updated VCC for some type of graphics acceleration. Is that what you see, John?
My impression is that the original sources in VCC were written for DirectX, I guess, very Windows specific. And I think they're converting the graphics to target SDL, which is a more platform agnostic version of graphics. And I think he's indicating he's making some progress there.
Is that's Live SDL, right? I've used that on Mac OS.
Yeah, I think so.
It is a cross-platform graphics package. Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So
does that mean that VCC is going to go on another platform?
I think he's targeting Linux.
I mean, once it's on SDL, it should be fairly easy to file it back out to Windows and Mac and maybe even some other systems. So pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So we got to something here from PageTable.com. Let's see who was. That's Michael Steele, and he does a lot of really cool deep dives into like Commodore 64 and 6502 assembly and stuff like that. Here he's got it says something called Tamu. This Tamu is a super cheap open source hardware, 24 megahertz ARM computer with 8 kilobytes of RAM, 64 kilobytes of ROM, and it fits into your USB connector. It sounds like what he's done is taken some very tiny piece of computer kit, about the size of a thumb drive, and he's ported so he's got a version of Commodore 64 Basic that I think he basically turned the 6502 assembler either manually or maybe with a tool of some sort, and basically turned it into a C implementation of the Commodore 64 Basic that you can use like a shell. Which is kind of crazy by itself, but so he's got that running on top of this little thumb-size computer that plugs into a USB port. This is probably in the category of, not a CoCo project, but maybe it could be. There's stuff on the net where people have taken the Color Basic and stripped it down, and I kind of did a version of that myself for where we could run Color Basic on what is that little board called? So you could do something like this for Color Basic instead of C64 Basic. I don't know if anybody's that motivated for Color Basic as a shell for a tiny thumb-sized computer, but I don't know. No, this is what some other people are doing, so get out there and get your geek on. All right, so let's see, moving on to the next one. So this little, I think I mentioned in the past, I've got a connection to a local makerspace. And this set of photos is actually from the makerspace, and the guy who's kind of the head of it is a friend of mine named Ben Harris, or Bennett Harris. But it's a cool little construction photo write-up or photo blog or whatever. He took now this is for Commodore 64. So he's got a Commodore 64, the later model, the non-bread bin model, I guess, and a Commodore disk drive. He's kind of put them together into what almost looks like a picnic tray. and so he's kind of mounted them in there, and the tray has cutouts so that you can still access the disk drive to feed it diskettes. And then you can like pick the thing up and carry it around, and it's almost like a CoCo style case or a Tandy 1000HX style case wrapped around this Commodore 64 and the disk drive, and then you can set a monitor on top. Then you can do your retro computing that way. Certainly could do a similar project around a CoCo case and FT501 plugged in there. Might want to have to do something about the floppy controller sticking out the side, but details.
Yeah, a little ribbon cable, you're all set.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, though. Great pictures of that.
Yeah, so it's a nice write-up, and it's a nice idea. I thought some people might be inspired by it. Very cool. So the next one, the last, let's see, this is from David Mitchell. I think he's in the UK for what it's worth. And he's got, he calls SG Edit Remix. And SG Edit was the original SG Edit came from Simon Jonason, and he built a kind of a web tool to let you draw using the simographics modes and then save off the result as a collection of data bytes to recreate the picture. And at some point, David Mitchell picked that up and has been enhancing it. And so it says version 2.2, selected character now highlighted. Assembly output now has the display routine. So I guess he's got a version where you can save it as assembled source, and maybe he's got some code that will display the source. CSV, import, export, edit. So there's a different format for saving the picture. Safely prompt before CLS. I guess that's so you don't wipe out your work accidentally. And it says move to GitLab. So GitLab is like the new alternative to GitHub from the people that are paranoid about Microsoft buying GitHub. So anyway, SGEd is kind of a cool tool, and it's good to see it's getting some enhanced life. I used SGEd, the Simon's original version. I used that to do the Christmas tree stuff in Xmas Rush. The title screen. All right.
Next news item is from Rick Adams. He rescued his Delphi Term CoCo 3 terminal program source. So he's actually releasing this, and it was rescued. Mr. Reitveld at CoCo Fest was able to get the data off some old floppies he had. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely cool to get together and get a little mixture of talents in the room together like at CoCo Fest, and good things happen. So very cool to see that, and both to see the source recovered and to see Rick being generous with the community and making it available.
Stuff like that getting lost, it's not good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, our next news item is from John Nelson Rose. Retro games as a revivalist movement?
Yeah. So this is a Gamma Sutra link. They take games pretty seriously over at Gamma Sutra.
Yeah, for sure.
And so this is kind of comparing some gaming topics to like artwork or the architecture. I guess architecture specifically. You hear about like Greek revival architecture versus neoclassical and blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. So he's kind of putting game design in some of the same terms that people have put like art design in the past. So kind of a cool read, maybe a little thick on the academics, but you may check it out. Maybe it'll appeal to you.
All right, our next news item. This one's actually kind of interesting to me. Is it seems to, we seem to hear about this every so often. Radio Shack's comeback is taking shape, and this was a New York Post.
Another Radio Shack's on its way back kind of story. We'll see. Hopefully good things will happen to Radio Shack despite themselves or whatever. I'd like to see them stick around in some form. Certainly would like it if they could come back and be useful to me again. That'd be personal plus for me. But
good start.
I don't know if that'll ever happen.
What is Hobbytown? You guys have those around you? I've never heard of that.
We do have one around. Yeah, there are some that's not too far away. So you're talking about the Hobbytown. They're going to have the Radio Shack section in the Hobbytown. So that might be, if I just have to have that resistor that I don't have time to order online, it might be a possibility. So that'd be kind of cool.
Well, and I think there's still hope because that one Radio Shack you found, Mike, near your place, those pictures are amazing.
Yeah, it look nice.
Yeah, it was a fun little time machine to go into.
Yeah, that parts wall
there. Yeah, it looks like an old style 80s Radio Shack for sure.
And it was a franchise, Mike.
Yes, but it's closer to me than Hobbytown, USA.
Very cool.
Might be worth donating some CoCos in there to really simulate that display.
Well, speaking of time machine,
our next story, and I pity any fools that don't read it. It's this is from Riot at YouTube, and it's Mr. T. Be somebody or be somebody's fool.
Now, Mike, you got to say that in Mr. T style with the horse.
I pity the fool.
So, I'm not even sure where I came across this video link, but it just was so 80s. It just screamed 80s at me.
Yep.
I just loved it. I mean, even just looking at the kids in it and whatever, it's like, man, that is just so cool. So that's why I included it, because I thought other people might enjoy it.
All right, our next story is from Nick Vermentes. Gunstar Game Blog, Chapter 6, Let There Be Music, Part 3. It's kind of funny because Nick is talking about a problem that I'm sure many programmers encounter, is that he's working on his game music composer to support his Gunstar game, but that's turned into, taken over as kind of the project right now at the moment.
He got his own GMC on his back now.
That sounds funny.
Yeah, it is. It happens to all of us at some point, where you pick up a project to advance another project, and then the new project becomes the project. Hopefully we'll get that worked out, and maybe we'll see a Gunstar game eventually. That'd be cool.
Oh, always good reading on his blog, though.
Yep.
All right, our final news story. It's from Camillus Blocks. My real MX mechanical keyboard prototype is getting there. A few things to make better, and then sublimation print some keys.
Yeah, so in honor to our Cloud 9 project we talked about earlier with mechanical keyboards, he's of course can't do a decent project in the CoCo community without someone else coming along to do the same project. So here's something that proves the rule. So Camillus is working on his own mechanical keyboard. Looks like it could be cool. His connector looks a little sketchy, but maybe you get that one worked out with a nicer connector. Very cool. So we might get some new keyboards over the next year or two. That might be cool. All right. Well, that covers our news for this week. Take another break, and we'll be back with some feedback.
What's going on, CoCo Cruisers? The original gamer Stevie Stroh here, and I'm the host of CoCo Talk. What is CoCo Talk, you ask? Well, we are a weekly live talk show on YouTube featuring the Tandy Color computer. And guess what? CoCo Talk is now also available as an audio podcast for your listening pleasure. So when you are done listening to the CoCo Crew podcast, come check us out at cocotalk.live for weekly live talk featuring the Tandy Color computer. We'll see you there, CoCo Cruisers.
Tandy Assembly. Tandy Assembly is about Radio Shack and Tandy computers.
Tandy Assembly is about interacting.
Tandy Assembly is about people.
Tandy Assembly is about fun.
The first gathering of its kind.
Computers of the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
All Radio Shack and Tandy makes and models.
Join us. Don't miss Tandy Assembly.
In Springfield, Ohio, November 10th and 11th.
Whether you're near or far,
Tandy Assembly is for everyone.
Visit our webpage at www.tandyassembly.com.
Tandy Assembly.
Okay, now we're back with some feedback. We've got a couple items this month. First is a reminder from Mr. D. Bruce Moore, our Canadian contact. Oh, wait, I guess that's Neil. I don't know. Neil, sorry, I didn't want to break it to you this way. No, so Mr. Bruce has been working on basically a radio play that he calls CoCo Forever. This is my multimedia CoCo product, the CoCo Forever series, was released in the spring of 2018 with the episodes available on cocoforever.gracenote.ca. He's got an episodic radio play available. I think he charges a couple of bucks an episode. I'm not sure the price. You'll have to look it up. It's entertaining. I've heard the first couple of episodes he has made available. It is a fictional story. It's kind of entertaining. Put some people in different situations or make a few different historical choices or what would the kind of speculating on how the world might be different. It's kind of fun. Thank you, Bruce. And the next one comes from Chad Johnson. He posted on Facebook. He called it trolling. I think we really meant lurking, or most of us would call it lurking. He'd been lurking for a while and was encouraging other lurkers to hang out and to participate in the community. But he mentioned the CoCo Crew. He says, finding the CoCo Crew podcast was the greatest thing ever. I spent hundreds of dollars due to listening without a shadow of regret.
That's great. That's
high praise. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, so I guess he's been inspired by some of the projects we've talked about or whatever to spend a little money in the community, so that's good. Very exciting.
So the CoCo Crew is contributing to the CoCo economy.
Yeah, I guess so.
We hope so.
Very exciting. All right, well, that's our feedback for this month, so taking another little break and be back with the rest of the show.
Where's Jill?
She's really lonely. She's been spending hours on her Tandy 1000 again.
Do you think Dave will ever find his true love?
Not if he's been playing Quasar Commander on his CoCo all day.
We used to be lonely.
Until we met on tandysonly.com.
Tandysonly.com is the new online dating site for folks who won't give up their Tandy computers.
You don't have to be lonely at tandysonly.com.
All right, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. Here we're going to have a little host discussion. The topic of the discussion I've listed as are we CoCo reporters or CoCo commentators? And by we, I mean the hosts on the show here. And kind of the gist of the discussion is when there's some news in the CoCo community, are we supposed to just totally relate the news? Are we supposed to cheerlead everything that comes on? or if we have something that shows up and that kind of leaves us cold, or that maybe we think is a bad idea, is it our place, or even might it be our responsibility to pass on our general opinion to the community, to our listeners? Perhaps I'm revealing my position a little early, but do we owe it to the listeners to give you our honest opinion about things, or are we supposed to just cheerlead and shut up? And so, with that said, maybe I'll open it up to my broadcasting partners here. Mike, do you have anything open?
I guess it depends on the context, right? Sometimes we are, and most of the time we're not commentators. I don't think so. We're more reporters, and we kind of shift gears maybe to do commentary for a specific reason, as a specific topic to focus on something per se. We certainly report on events, the news items. I think mostly where this issue comes up is, with specific products or offerings that people make in the community. I don't think we're obligated to cheerlead everything like you say. I like to think we do a fair job of reporting things. I don't feel like we're going out of our way to destroy anyone or put people down. We don't want to do that. We want to boost the community. I think everybody's interested in that. From that end, I don't really think that we're being critics or fulfilling a reviewer role, if you will. We may make comments about things, but I don't think he can cite any kind of vicious attack or denouncing of anyone's work or projects. So.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. As someone who's offered products to the community in not too long in the past, or maybe even in current times, I'll say I don't feel like the community in general has made a habit of pulling punches about commenting on things that I've offered. And so I think if the community somehow expects me to be the only one to hold their fire while the community shoots at me, I think they're going to be mistaken or disappointed in that. But this isn't personal. It's not like I'm not, like you said, I'm not citing any specific thing. I'm just going to say that the ideas come up, and some of them are exciting, and I'll try to find the positive bits of any idea that comes up. But some ideas leave me a little cold, and they make me wonder. Well, not only why. I mean, it's one thing. It's your thing. You're scratching your itch. You do you. Okay, that's fine. When you're, on the other hand, trying to produce a product that you want people to buy, and then you throw it out there, and to me it's like, well, I don't know why anybody would need that, or why anybody would want that, or if you want to do that, you could use this other thing that already exists or is free or whatever. Well, I'm going to tell you that. You know what I mean? That's what I'm going to say it. And like I said, you come out with your new product that automatically brushes people's teeth. I'm going to tell you that, oh, well, that's fine, but everybody's already got a toothbrush, and it doesn't take that much effort to brush your own teeth. You know what I mean?
The only problem is that the toothbrush isn't CoCo powered.
Well, there you go. Well, so what do you think, Neil? I mean, part of those segments that you do on the show is particularly to do a review of games and such. Now, I haven't heard you do any negative reviews that I can recall, and I'm sure you don't want to do a negative review if there's any redeeming quality. But do you feel like you're obligated? I mean, obviously, you don't review everything.
No, I mean, I kind of pick and choose what I'm going to review. But I think we're more reporters, honestly. And with projects, I think you have to. We mentioned this before, but I think you have to do it for yourself. You don't want to rely on getting all this praise from everybody. I mean, Facebook's good enough for that, but and everyone's going to have different interests too. What one person finds in a project, might be some good qualities, and someone else won't. So you can't please everybody. But definitely getting the information out there, I mean, that counts in itself.
Yeah. Well, so to me, there's a conflict in what you said. I mean, you say we're reporters, but then can't expect everybody to praise you. I mean, that's saying, we offer reporting, we report that things have happened, but we're not going to necessarily praise it.
That's
to
just
me, it sounds like you're opening up there that we may comment on the project.
That's right. I mean, more or less as an information service.
Yeah.
Even if we don't agree with a certain project or product, we still announce it, right?
Well, right. We announce it, and that's true. And so, from that respect, we report news. We certainly have reported news on projects that compete with projects that we ourselves or products that we ourselves have offered. We've reported on other people's games. We've reported on other people's sound options. We've reported on other people's joystick adapters or joypad adapters. So we're certainly reporting on other stuff. And for the most part, I mean, when there's a direct conflict, I think we mostly keep our mouth shut. Anyway, just from the political standpoint.
Right.
So I'd rather not name specific projects on this discussion. But, there are projects that are in the community, even products that are in their community, that I honestly think you've lost your mind if you bother to buy them or install them. Yeah, I mean, I do. Honestly, I think there's some of them they're practically pickpocketing the people that are taking the money, that are spending money on them.
Every one of us here on the podcast right now have been involved with producing things or reselling things, and we're subject to all the same barbs and arrows as any other project that's out there, because you're always going to have naysayers. You're always going to have, and ultimately, like you said, you've got to do this for yourself. Ultimately, vote with your dollars, right?
Exactly.
If you like a project and you're interested in it, then by all means support it, and and at the same time, you don't have to go on some campaign against something you don't like. Just don't buy it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I don't think that we should go on a jihad against anybody's stuff, or maybe that's too politically sensitive a word, but I don't think we should just denounce stuff. But I guess the complaint is that sometimes they'll say something like, here's this thing, I'm not sure why you'd want it, but if you do, then contact so-and-so. Now, I don't really see a problem with saying that, or else I wouldn't say it. But apparently some people are bothered by that terminology or whatever when it's about something they produced. I produce things, you guys have produced things. Some of the things I produced have gotten quite a bit of criticism, much of it, in my opinion, unfair, or at least misguided. And so my point would be, well, okay, maybe I'm being wrong or misguided, but nobody held back on their opinions of my stuff, so how much do you expect me to hold back on my opinions of your stuff when I'm reporting it?
Well, I was thinking about this as you guys were talking. Whether the CoCo Group podcast should be considered CoCo reporters or commentary. I'll put it this way. When I was growing up, my favorite thing to listen to on the radio was Paul Harvey. Paul Harvey played both roles. He read the news, and he also gave commentary. And I find value in both of those things. I think we should read the news, any product, whether it's competing or not, with a concern or an interest of ours. We should be fair. We should report on it. And as far as commenting goes, there's 4 of us currently on this podcast, and we always don't walk to the beat of the same drum. So, John, what you may not find interesting, I may find interesting, or vice versa, or Mike or Neil. So I think having that eclectic group of people is going to bring in interesting commentary. We won't necessarily all be trumpeting the same thing or being partial to or impartial to the same thing. So I think we should play a role both as reading the news passionately at times, I guess, but also feeling free to comment and offer our perspectives. And that's where the commentary comes in. That's my take on it.
And I would agree with that. Well, let me just give an example. There's a podcast out there called Eaten by a Gru, and the gist of the podcast is the hosts play Infocom games, and they discuss them, right? The first part of their podcast, they discuss the games without talking about the solutions to any problems or the solutions to any puzzles or any kind of teaser or any kind of spoilers or whatever. And then they, partway through the podcast, they make a big deal about this is a spoiler fence. Don't listen to the podcast beyond this if you don't want any spoilers. And then after the spoiler fence, then they'll talk about, well, on this puzzle, I had to go left and go right, and I had to pick up the monkey and throw it across the river, or, that kind of stuff, right? So my point or my question would be, do we need some, which I feel like we already kind of have this is the news segment, and okay, the news segment's over, and now we're going to have a host discussion. But I guess the complaint would be that even inside the news segment, maybe I've occasionally said something like, I don't know why you would want this, but if you do, then go what? And that's a little too much opinion for some folks, I suppose. But do we need some kind of, or should we have, or is it desirable, or, should we think about some kind of opinion fence? Do we need to be total straight men during the news? Or is it okay to show a little? Well, I'm not sure why this is interesting. Is that kind of comment okay?
I personally think that we should continue what we're doing. Maybe just be a little bit more sensitive to the interests of those whose products we talk about, and it's a matter of do unto others as you would have others do unto you, I guess.
Sure.
Not that it's okay to say, look, this isn't for me. And here's why it isn't for me, but it might be for you. It's
right.
It's all about how you word it and how you say it. But I would not try to separate the commentary from the news, because that's part of the fun of listening to the podcast.
Right. Well, I agree with that. There have been times when there was maybe not that much news, and especially back when I was reading all the news items myself, and you get 15 or 20 or 30 items into some. Which is, if there's 30 items, there must be some news. But maybe there's 20 items, and maybe it's, not, maybe I've had to scrape them together. You know what I mean? And you get 20 items in or 15 items in, and it's kind of scraped together. Maybe not the most newsworthy month. And boy, it gets a little tough to keep going.
Yeah.
And then somebody says, here's somebody's product that, it's their product, and it's their baby. I guess you don't want to call their baby ugly, and I guess that's the feeling. Maybe that's the point, is it feels like you're calling their baby ugly. There's things that people to this day say about, my Game Master cartridge, that to me, I just want to say, how many times do I have to point out that is just completely wrong? I just want to jump through the YouTube and choke somebody, Maybe it's the same kind of thing when I say, well, I don't get it, but maybe you do. I guess that could be somebody's pet peeve, So if it's your pet peeve, I'm sorry. I don't mean to provoke your pet peeve. I won't promise never to do it. I'll try to be cognizant of it and, limit it some. But yeah, like I say, I'm with Boise. I think the commentary adds flavor. It's like salt on the news, and you don't want a little salt or a little pepper. Maybe you need to go eat in another kitchen.
Well, we also have feedback at cococrew.org.
Well, that's true.
If you feel we've said something out of line, or you disagree with something, it's not like it's a one-way conversation. You can certainly reach out to us and further the discussion.
Definitely, either by email or there's a good chance if you feel you've been wronged, we could have you on air and we could talk about it. And we're pretty nice folks. We normally won't tear anybody up. So, well, what do you think? Is there more to discuss here, or is that about do it?
Solved it.
Resolved.
Done.
Well, okay. Then let's y'all's this segment to conclusion. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back with the rest of the show.
Turn any color computer with Extended Basic into a complete disk system with the new FD501 Color Thin Line Disk from Radio Shack. Store over 156K of data, write your own disk programs, or use ready-to-run software.
The disk operating system is built into the program pack cartridge that connects the disk drive to your color computer, and the FD501 has room to add a second drive, providing an additional 156K of storage. This month only, purchase a 2-drive FD501 color thin-line disk system for just $359.95. That's a 25% savings. Apply in-store for a CityLine revolving account and pay as low as $20 per month. The FD501 thin-line disk. Only from Radio Shack, a Tandy company.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back to another tech segment with your host, John Linville. Today we're going to talk a little bit about project enclosures. So rather than talking about building hardware or designing software or any particular features or technical features of either, we're going to talk about how to close in your hardware project into some sort of box that makes it more of a product than a project. And there's a variety of reasons to do this. Tends to make them a little more sellable, tends to make them last a bit longer because if you have a bare circuit board just sitting out, you can have electric shock, you can have shorts, that sort of thing. If you have wires just hanging off of a circuit board, they will tend to have some stress on them. They can break off the board. So generally speaking, it's just a good thing to have your circuit board enclosed. This is where a lot of people kind of get stymied once they figured out. It's hard enough for some people to figure out how to design a circuit board. The next step is a little difficult. Now, we all have seen, like at Radio Shack in the days past, they always had, project boxes available. And sometimes they're made out of steel or plastic or whatever, but they're just a box. And maybe some screws to let you open one side of the box or different ends of the box or whatever, but not really a lot of information on what to do with them or how to customize them. And that can be difficult, so we'll get to that a little bit later, but in many cases this will involve a certain amount of getting your hands dirty with some hand tools and doing some measurements and that sort of thing. But the results can be quite nice. Depends on what your project is. Nowadays, a lot of projects, electronics projects, or what would have been true electronics projects, nowadays are really more software projects, but they're built around something like an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi or some other off-the-shelf board that basically has a CPU on it. It's a little computer all by itself. Some of these ESP, whatever the numbers are. All those projects, most of them you can get some sort of cases to go around them from a variety of sources. Quite often they're basically exact fit for the board. So many of the boards have a certain number of ports on them, and there'll be, holes in the cases to accommodate those ports, which may be appropriate for your project, maybe not. It kind of depends. Your project on something like a Raspberry Pi, you might have a project that only uses a couple of the I/O ports on the board. It may seem a little silly to have the board out there with, different kinds of video ports and serial ports and stuff that you're not even using. Of course, if you're not using them, you might have chosen the wrong board in the first place, but it kind of depends. So quite often with like an Arduino, you can get plastic boxes that fit them, and they'll have some knockouts for some of the different ports so that you can expose them if you want to, but you don't have to. The Arduino in particular is built around the idea of these stackable shields. So quite often you can get boards for them that accommodate some of the more common shields. You may or may not have those shields, or you might have a different shield. I don't know. You have to investigate what's available if you're using that sort of option, but just know that if you are using some sort of off-the-shelf board, there's probably an off-the-shelf case that could at least enclosed in plastic and maybe make it look a little bit nicer, a little more saleable, a little more of a product than just a project. That said, moving beyond to, you can get the boxes, kind of like I was mentioning with Radio Shack, you can get what are known as project boxes. And they come in a variety of materials. There's probably some, I'm sure you can get steel boxes, you can get aluminum boxes. You can get a variety of plastics, different kinds of plastics, translucent, different colors. And perhaps more importantly, you can get them with different kinds of openings, different shapes. Not all of them are just square or rectangular or cubic boxes. You can get them with sloped fronts and rounded sides and just all sorts of things. So if you want to look into finding project boxes, there's a variety of internet sources. I'm not even going to cite them. They're just too easy to find with Google. Just Google for project boxes or project enclosures or electronic enclosures. You'll find a lot of suppliers, and you go and you look, and they'll have the huge lists, and they'll give you some idea of the dimensions, and maybe they'll have them broken down by shapes or by materials, maybe even by colors. It just depends. But you can find them out, and so pick a box that's roughly the size that you need, and it really probably needs to be a little bit bigger than the minimum. Just because it can't be smaller than the minimum. But you can find them. Like I said, look around. You need to have a good idea of the size of a project box you're going to need. So one thing that I did, like with the Sega joypad adapters that Neil sells, the original prototype was just on perfoboard, and then the first PCB I did. I just did a PCB that was, well, maybe not the minimum size, but a size that was comfortable for me, and then use that to pick an appropriate box, and then I went and redesigned the board to fit the mounting options available to the box that we'd picked. But that depends on being able to get some stuff, some information about the box. So anyway, you need to find your box. If you go through some of these suppliers, you usually can find mechanical drawings before you ever even buy the box. That'll give you an idea of what sort of mounting options are available, where the screw holes are, if there are screw holes or mounting lugs at all. Some boxes just have slots on the sides, so then your PCB just sort of slides in down on a slot. You need to have some idea, how low in the box are the slots, how thick are the slots. Your PCB, of course, needs to match that. PCBs are often roughly the same size, but they're not all exactly the same size. So, meaning thickness, not always the same thickness. So you want to be aware of the thickness of your PCB and make sure your box has a slot. If you want to use a slot mounting, you need to make sure the box has a slot that fits. So anyway, there's lots of suppliers available on the internet, both just plain old plastic box suppliers. You usually can go through the big electronic suppliers, like say a Jamco or a Mauser, and find a lot of boxes that way. You also can go on eBay looking for project enclosures, and there will be a lot of them. There's some problems with using eBay. I find that eBay project enclosures, quite often, they're less likely to provide you than any mechanical drawings. So it's a little harder to get started on your project before you've actually bought them. And quite often when you're buying stuff like that off of eBay, it comes from China, so you order it, and by the time it arrives, you wonder who sent you this nice plastic box that you've been wondering about because you forgot that you ordered it. Anyway, also, if you're buying off of eBay, you need to be aware of the supply restrictions. Sometimes the suppliers will just, the box you buy may be the last one they ever sell, and then it just may not be available. And so if you want to build one project and you get one box, that's fine. If you want to go into the market making a sustainable product, you need to make sure that your boxes you're buying are still going to be available as you continue to make runs of the product. So something to be aware of. Anyway, so what you get is a box, and it'll be probably either aluminum or plastic. It'll have various openings available, probably with some way to shut them, some sort of door or whatever. You pick the right box, you might have a battery compartment. You might have screws that open the box and maybe in more than one place. It just depends on what you need and what you've chosen. And so then, you've got your square box, and hopefully you've got something you can put your PCB into. But then usually you need some way to connect your PCB to something outside the box, power or nothing else. So again, some boxes will accommodate that. They'll have a battery case or something. But usually what you'll need to do is mark off the box and figure out where you're going to screw hole or where you're going to drill holes in it. If you're building like a joystick, you'll need to figure out where you're going to cut holes to mount the buttons. where you're going to cut holes to mount the stick mechanism, the gimbal or whatever you're using. So you need to figure that out. Again, if you have the mechanical drawings to begin with, assuming they're correct, you might be able to get started. It's advisable to make some sort of template out of, say, cardboard, and you can get that right, and then find some way to register that on the box, meaning some way to make sure you put it on the box where where the holes on your template match to where you want the holes in the box. Something like having a screw hole, you can put the template on the box and put a screw in to hold it in place, something like that. But anyway, yeah, this is when, at this point, you'll need to get out your tools. You need to get out your drills. You may want to use a handheld drill, or what they call like an egg beater style drill. They're a little more easy to control in small spaces if you're using just hand tools. Or you might use a drill press. You have to be aware of things like what kinds of bits to use. If you use a normal twist bit, a lot of times, especially if you're using handheld tools, those are a little bad about walking along the surface. So you may want to use what's called a Forstner bit, which does a little bit better job at actually cutting a nicely dressed round hole. Quite often you want to start your holes using your fingers to rotate the drill bit to at least get it started, because once they kind of start cutting their hole, then they don't walk around as much. It's all basic essentially it's basic carpentry stuff that in another age we might have learned in the 8th grade shop class, but since nobody has those anymore, you might not be as aware of the basic stuff there. But yeah, so you want to cut your holes, you can drill your holes. If you need to cut more square holes, you might use a drill to remove a lot of the material, and then use some like a file to straighten up the square edges. If you're using plastic or thin aluminum or something, you might be able to use a tool called a nibbler, which is pretty good at cutting out straight edges and corners. But yeah, you're gonna have to do some hand modification if you start with an off-the-shelf box. And so, like I said, you probably want to try to get mechanical drawings from your supplier. If you don't have them, you can't get them, then you want to use a micrometer or so. Otherwise, be very careful about your measurements. And it's definitely a measured twice, cut once kind of situation, because once you cut the hole's going to be there. And maybe that's not so bad if you're building one thing for yourself. But if you're building several, then you want them all to be pretty much the same, and you certainly don't want random holes in any of them. All right, well, so there you go. You can either use we're talking about off-the-shelf stuff that is sort of exact fit, like for an Arduino. We're talking about the traditional project boxes, which are kind of just square, usually square or cubic boxes, but they can be curved or have different styles depending on what you find. Limit is mostly your willingness to search for it, and it's a pretty good chance if you want it, somebody else is providing it. You just have to keep looking. Now, what if none of those are really good enough for you? So you might want to go on to a custom design. Maybe maybe what you're building is especially maybe especially big or awkwardly shaped, or needs going to need a lot of access holes or whatever. So something like the a multi-pack replacement is going to be kind of an awkward thing to fit into an off-the-shelf box because of sort of has an L shape and some big holes and whatever. So you may want to go ahead and try to figure out how to get a custom design, a custom box built, which typically you're going to need some kind of 3D design, which is a more common skill than it used to be, thanks to the kind of the maker movement out there. A lot of maker spaces have people doing a 3D design in like SketchUp or something like that. So ultimately, what kind of things are you talking about? So one construction technique that's pretty common with building these sort of boxes is you can do laser cutting. and you can laser cut a variety of materials, including like acrylic, which is usually kind of a clear, like a plastic glass kind of replacement. You can cut them out of wood, like spruce or something like that. You'll see that you've seen the boxes that are people build things and they'll be wood and they'll have almost like a black along the edge, and that's because the laser literally is burned through the wood to cut it. Which some people like that look, some people don't. Depends on you. But you can also cut them out of plastic, whatever. But typically, characteristic of the laser cut designs is you'll have kind of a castellated side, or a kind of a tab and space, tab, space, tab, space, and so that when you put them together, like you have the two, the top, say a wall and a side and a bottom, and the tabs on one will fit into the spaces on the other, and then you kind of screw them together, and there's a variety of ways to do that. Sometimes the screws will actually kind of embed in some more tabs, and so that you get kind of a T-shaped thing, and the tabs might trap a nut in them that is then used with another screw to hold it in. It can get pretty elaborate. If you talk to your local makerspace people, there's probably somebody who knows how to design laser cut stuff with screw tab construction. I don't know. You may want to go look into it. This is typically going to be square. Well, so it's like software for designing square boxes this way, or rectangular, cubic kind of stuff, is pretty much dime a dozen. But people who know what they're doing will know how to maybe accommodate a more advanced shape if you want, for some reason. If you want to have other than 90-degree angles, there are possibilities there, but typically you're going to be ending up with a box that's basically a square box. And you may wonder why you didn't just start off with a basically square project box off the shelf. I don't know. It depends on what you like. Typically, then you're still going to need some holes and such cut in it. If you're doing laser cut, obviously the laser cutter, while it's cutting out the sides and the back, whatever, it can also cut holes in there for you. So that can be helpful for cutting access points for electronic parts or whatever, for like your DB9s or whatever. Okay, well, so that's one way to cut things out. Another way that's similar is with a CNC, or what was it, computer numerical controller. Basically, a CNC is a computer-controlled router, and I don't mean router like on the internet. I mean router like one of those fancy handheld, almost like a drill thing that you typically was used to chamfer the edges on the woodworking. But you put that into a computer-controlled machine with an XY table, and suddenly you can go and cut things out, and similar to the way you cut things out with a laser cutter. Although you can get a whole lot of, well, I don't know for sure if it's a limitation, but it seems to be that you can get, with a CNC machine, you can get bigger designs cut out, and sort of more complex stuff. You certainly can get things with like chamfered edges and V-cuts and engraving and that sort of stuff, which can be pretty nice to have like a design engraved in the side of your box or whatever. There's a limited amount of that sort of thing, like the engraving especially, available with laser cut, but generally speaking, when you're cutting with a laser, you're just cutting straight through, so you end up with 90-degree walls on your cuts. And again, like a CNC, you can use different tools, and you can end up with the rounded or chamfered edges, and pretty complex designs. But ultimately, you're still going to have to put the box together, so there's going to have to be some way that you have interlocking tabs or just different places to put screws or whatever to hold your box together. Again, you're going to need somebody to help with SketchUp or whatever 3D design software to work with your CNC. Hopefully that person has enough experience they can guide you a bit on what the construction ought to be. Now, Now, the topics that people seem to jump to first, I'm going to get to not quite last, but finally at the idea of 3D printing a case or whatever. So again, you're going to need someone who's good with 3D design, SketchUp or whatever similar products to produce your design that you want to have printed. There are considerations to be taken when you can design something for 3D printing because of the way the 3D printing deposits layer upon layer. It kind of restricts to some degree what's printable. Overhangs and that sort of thing can be a problem. So depending on how complex your physical design is, you may need to print multiple pieces and figure out how to get those joined together, either with screws or glued or whatever. But typically we're just talking about boxes with holes in them. So with 3D printing, you have holes in your box. You tend to just not print the holes, or you print, the edges of the hole. Basically, the holes are there as you print, so you don't have to take them away. Now, quite often, holes in 3D printed objects don't look very nice around the edges, so then that might need to be cleaned up a little bit. I personally am not a fan of the way 3D printed objects look in terms of even the nicest ones still tend to be, when you feel them with your fingers, you can kind of feel that, that layer upon layer kind of creates almost like a grooved side effect. Some, like I said, the higher quality printers, 3D printers, it's not as bad. But they do tend to have weakness again between those layers at some point. So if you're going to put much stress on your box, that's probably where they'll fail, is between two layers. So just be aware of that. But I think the biggest problem with 3D printing is that if your box gets to be of any size, it takes forever. They just, you can imagine you're putting down that tiny little layer of plastic and run around all of the surface at one layer, and then you go back and you do it again for the next layer, and you probably have certainly dozens, maybe hundreds. I wouldn't be surprised if in some cases if you have thousands of layers on a sizable piece, and they just run and they run and they run and they run. They take a long time, and so this is part of the limitation on, say, the community, the CoCo community, has been depending on John Strong to produce a lot of 3D printed boxes for Ed Snyder's projects and for his own cartridge cases and a few other things. And I know he's got a couple of 3D printers, and when it gets close to CoCo Fest time, they run, I think, 24 hours a day for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So anyway, that's the biggest limitation with the 3D printed objects is just they take a while to produce. Whereas something that's laser cut or CNC cut, it takes a little time to cut them out, but basically you put the material down and you kind of press go, and it goes and cuts them out in an amount of time that, as a human, you can probably imagine it. It's whereas 3D printing just kind of goes and goes and goes until it's done. Anyway, but 3D printing has a lot of flexibility and can produce a lot of different shapes and stuff. Again, the designs are not always that physically strong because of that layered construction, but as long as the shape is what's important and not the actual strength of the box, like in something that's really just an enclosure, that's not really much of an issue. Okay, so one more in the custom design category where you're going to have to do a lot of 3D design. If you're really serious, you can go about doing injection molding. So an injection mold, of course, is basically you produce a mold typically made out of you typically wouldn't use it and touch it yourself. Somewhere it's going to have to be made and produced out of aluminum or steel or something. And they put it in a machine, and the machine gets some really hot plastic, ABS plastic typically, and they squeeze it and literally inject this hot plastic into the mold, and then give it just enough time to cool off to where it hardens up a little bit, and then the mold kicks them out. And this is what you're used to looking at when you get plastic cups or football helmets or almost any box or anything for electronics that you would get from a commercial vendor. And this is the method that we use for producing the cartridge cases that we've been producing cartridges with the past couple of years. This is not at all a cheap method. I do believe it produces a very quality output, but you do need some special skills for doing the design. You have to take into account the injection molding process. Now, it used to be harder to get this, but just like now, you can go to certain services and get 3D printed stuff done. Even if you don't have a 3D printer, you can order a 3D printed object. A lot of those places now are starting to offer injection molding as a service as well. Again, it's not going to be cheap, but it might be cheap enough depending on how many you want to make. So you want to take a look at that. Okay, so there's one more custom plastic design or whatever, way to produce custom plastic parts that I'll talk about. And this is what I did actually before we were doing the injection molded cartridges. You can actually do a resin cast plastic. And in this case, you can buy plastic resin. Typically, well, you can get them at hobby stores. The nicer stuff you want to order online. But basically, you get typically a two-part resin. So you have, it's just like if you ever used epoxy to glue something together, you have the two chemicals. You have to mix them together, and then they become a glue. In this case, you have the two chemicals, and you mix them together, and then they become a plastic resin. And typically, once you mix them, you have a limited amount of time to work with them before they start to harden up. And so you mix the liquid resins, the two parts together. You may or may not add some dye, depending on what colors you want. And then you pour them into a mold. And so typically your mold is going to be made probably from silicone. So you're going to have to, you're definitely going to get your hands dirty doing the resin casting, because you're going to have to make the molds from silicone. That's kind of a messy process. It basically amounts to pouring some silicone, some liquid silicone into a box, and then putting your item you want to make the mold of into the box, and then pouring some more silicone on it. Depending on how you may make a one-piece mold, or you might make a two-piece mold. Anyway, your molds will wear out, so you want to keep your original around, because you can only get so many casts per mold before they end up destroyed. But once you have your mold made, whether it's one piece or two piece, you can go about your resin casting. You make a resin, pour it into the mold, give it enough time to set up, remove it from the mold. Hopefully don't damage your mold. Pull the plastic out. Hopefully don't damage that. Hopefully you got a good pour, so you have to worry about air bubbles getting in your poured resin, because that'll of course make a defective part. Anyway, it's a little bit of a skill, but you can do it. And once you've done it, if you want to reproduce something you already have, you can make very exact copies of something down to fairly minute details. If you're using it to produce something new, then you're going to need a bit of you're going to need some sculpting skill to create the original shape that you then use to make your molds. If you can also do that, you can start with, say, like I started with a Radio Shack cartridge case, and then wanted to make some changes to its shape, so I used some modeling clay to add on to the cartridge case shape, and then made the mold out of that, and then cast the resin in there. And so the pieces I made were not identical to the original Radio Shack cases. They were the shape that I had modified them to be. So you can do some customization there. You can put you can cut things in, have like a stencil or whatever to almost like a brand or whatever in the parts you made. I don't know, it's really all up to you. I would not recommend resin casting for high quantity, but again, if you have low quantity or a very specialized kind of thing you need to do, resin casting is an option. Again, your mileage may vary. Oh, and also, if you're doing resin casting, you might consider using some of the 3D design skills we talked about earlier, and instead of producing your final parts, you use those to produce your mold, and produce your mold out of something durable, and then you're going to, have to coat it with release agents or whatever so that you can get your plastic parts out of the mold once you build it. But anyway, something to think about. All right, no matter how you produce your parts, assuming other than the off-the-shelf stuff for like your Arduino or whatever, if you need to do any kind of modifications or whatever, any kind of hole cutting or to get cables in and out, you're going to want to think about putting grommets in to keep your cables from wearing out against the edges of the holes you made in your plastic cases, that sort of thing. If you put a cable into your box, you want to think about stress relief, so that if you pull on the cable, you're not yanking on the solder joints, so you don't accidentally yank your cable off the PCB inside the enclosure. Typically, you want to think about getting some sort of rubber feet for your box so that it's able to sit on the table and not scratch up a table. Even if you only ship with a bare PCB, you may want to think about putting rubber feet on it just so it keeps the PCB off the table. Depending on what you want to do with your plastic box, if you produce something custom, you may want to think about adding some sort of tabs to your box you produce so that you can then screw your box into something else. It depends on what you're building, how that might be appropriate, but say if you're say if you were building something that made floppy drives better, you might think about putting tabs on it so you can screw your box into a floppy drive case, for example. I don't know, maybe that's silly, but something to think about. Anyway, well, I think that covers a lot of ground. Sort of a brain dump here on my own experience dealing with getting enclosures for electronic projects. There's probably other options that I haven't covered. I don't know. If you think of any, feel free to let me know, or if you have questions about things I've covered here, obviously reach out, send us email, feedback@cococrew.org, or send something to me at john@cococrew.org. And I'll be happy to hear from you, and I'll try to answer any questions you might have. All right, well, I think that's enough for now, so happy cocoing, and we'll see you later.
The CoCo is a powerful computer, and the multi-pack enables you to expand with RS-232, floppy controller, and hard disk drives. But don't you think your CoCo would be a lot nicer without all of the mess hanging off the right side? Of course it would. The Connect Expander replaces the lower half of your CoCo case and allows mounting two SCS-decoded devices like a floppy and hard drive controller inside of your CoCo. The Expander board includes a 12-volt power supply and provides a built-in no-slot RS-232 port. The external cartridge slot is still available for game cartridges or additional hardware. The Expander kit is just $124.95, or you can purchase just the board alone for just $99.95. It's great for repacking a CoCo in a PC case. The Expander from Connect, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Well, as you find yourself near the end of the CoCo Crew podcast on episode 38. Well, it's not quite the end yet. Right now you are inside Neil's Corner. And on this segment, I'm going to talk about a game called GnomeQuest. Yes, Gnome as in that Travelocity mascot. Anyways, I've just recently found out about this game from a post Ron Delvaux made on his very own Facebook group called Ron's Garage. If any of you are unfamiliar with Ron, he's an active member in the CoCo community and appears frequently on CoCo Talk. I like Ron because he usually does very interesting show and tell message posts, and a lot of the time it's on CoCo stuff that is rare or uncommon, such as this game, GnomeQuest, that I was completely unaware of until now. Alright, on to the game. GnomeQuest is coded by Mike Snyder and was published by Sportsware. Now, I have definitely heard of Mike Snyder, as he did a pile of other games for the CoCo platform, but I've never heard of the publisher Sportsware. Seems like an odd name to me. Did they release any sports games? I'm not quite sure. Maybe if any of you who are listening, you can chime in and send me some feedback. GnomeQuest was coded in 1990 and requires a Color Computer 3 with 128K of memory and a joystick plugged into the right joystick port. It is a platform-style game with static screens, meaning the screen does not scroll. The best comparison to describe this game to is a cross between Q*bert and Rupert's Rhythm. The object is to jump on all the different platforms and change their color. However, you do not need to change all the platform's color to pass the level. You basically just need to find the hidden platform that'll suck you in and take you to the next level. But if you want to boost your score, jumping on as many platforms as possible will definitely help. The nice thing is, you can memorize on each level what platform will suck you in, because it doesn't change randomly, as they always stay the same. As far as I can tell, there are no enemies in the game that come after you, although I haven't made it past Stage 1, Level 4 yet, so I could be wrong in the later stages and levels. It's tricky enough without enemies, just timing your jumps perfectly so you don't fall off the platforms. One last thing to note, if you see a series of platforms joined together, you cannot walk across onto them. Even though they're completely together, you still must jump onto each one of them, otherwise you will slip and fall through the cracks. I learned this the hard way. The game has very nice high-res color graphics that showcases the CoCo 3 modes nicely, and it does feature a little bit of music on boot up and on the starting of each level. I think it would have even been cooler if it featured some digitized audio like in Rupert Rhythm. But hey, beggars can't be choosy, as I'd be hard-pressed to code a dot on the screen in assembly language. Ron was nice enough to put the disk image of GnomeQuest on his Ron's Garage page, but I've also researched and tracked it down on the Color Computer Archive website. It's in a disk collection called Mike Snyder's Games. That zip file contains 10 disk images, and it's on disk number 5. I also noticed on disk number 6, there's a sequel to GnomeQuest called GnomeQuest 2 Firespire. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Possibly an upcoming review for next month. Alright, there you have it. Another fine game for you to load 'em on your CoCo 3. I certainly hope you've got your CoCo 3. Until next month, happy CoCo Gamer.
GimmeSoft presents Max Sound. GimmeSoft presents Max Sound.
GimmeSoft presents Max Sound.
Max Sound presents GimmeSoft. Max Sound is a hardware-software, high-quality audio recording station designed for the new Color Computer 3 by Lucas Industries 2000.
Max Sound allows you to store real music and voices in the Color Computer 3.
Max Sound will provide hours of fun for the whole family. From Helsinki to Christchurch, Max Sound, the quality recording studio of the 80s. From GimmeSoft.
Well, we have officially reached the end of episode 38. I hope all of you enjoyed this month's installment of the CoCo Crew podcast. We will, of course, return next month to a podcast player near you. I'd like to thank our host, John Linville, for gathering all the interesting news articles this month and providing another fantastic tech segment. Big thanks goes out to Mike Rowan for working super hard on those commercials and editing the show each month. I'd also like to thank Boise Pete for being a part of this show. Last but not least, we'd like to thank all of you who listen and support us each month. Like I've said in the past, if it weren't for you listening, well, there really wouldn't be much point in creating this podcast. Keep your feedback rolling in. We do like hearing from you. Well, until next month, happy CoCoing and retro forever.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Dance like there's no tomorrow.
What is this crazy rock and roll music anyway?
It's a blast from the past.
Dance, dance, dance. CoCo.